I always say I'm clairvoyant, but my joke is that my clairvoyance is out of focus, right? It's like my clairvoyance needs glasses. And sometimes that clairsentience also shows up in the way like people feel goosebumps, or I feel that in my head, or right, all those kind of pieces. And so we all receive information in usually a variety of ways.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. I'm delighted you could join us today. My intention in doing this show is to provide information, insight, and comfort to people all over the world by helping to answer life's unanswerable questions. Speaking of unanswerable questions, we got an Akashic Records expert on today. Lisa Barnett's joining us. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Julie. I am so excited to be here with you to share the infinite wisdom of the Akashic Records with you and your listeners.
Oh, me too. I got questions for you, girl. So let's just get right to it. What are Akashic Records?
Oh, perfect first question, right? So the Akashic Records are the recording of your soul's journey through all time, space continuum. And what that means in English is that when your soul individuates from source, it literally goes on this infinite journey. And everything you ever do, every place you live, or every dimension you even reside in is all recorded in this field known as the Akasha. And the Akasha is part of source energy. It is part of the quantum field. It is all a very infinite energy. But what that means for you is that the wisdom of your soul, of all the lives you've lived and all the information you've learned throughout time-space continuum, throughout history, is available to you to really access in your own Akashic Records.
Where did the Akashic Records originate, and what's the earliest mention of them?
Ooh, great questions. So the Akashic Record is an energy which is part of source. And so I'm going to say it originated in the beginning, whenever that was, right? So it's not a date. So if you imagine that every soul has this energetic ability to record its journey, every soul, everything, there are galactic Akashic records, there are infinite records really of like stories of planets. Now, I'm going to say that most of it is not that accessible to us, but it is there. It is written in this infinite energy of the Akash. So again, it's more like looking at that as the energy of your soul's journey is recorded in source energy in this quantum field. So it's always been there. But for us in humanity, I believe that people really started to kind of realize and talk about it and access it thousands and thousands of years ago. But it has been written about in some of the ancient texts, in the Torah, in the Bible. They refer to it as the Book of Life. And so it has been mentioned in different spiritual texts, probably more over the last 2,000 years.
How does one become an Akashic Records expert? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So my journey actually began as a toddler, which may sound a little bit odd, but when I was very small, I literally was a toddler and I didn't have a lot of language. I remember standing in the kitchen with my mother, and I was trying to tell her something. I was probably on some long tirade about something. And as my mother blankly looked at me and didn't know at all of what I was talking about, I remember my first memory, literally like looking at my hands and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm back in a body. Like I'm trapped was literally the feeling I had. And I remember kind of the remembrance, the knowing, that memory of not being in a body. And what I've realized after many years of working in the Akashic Records and asking different questions about these sorts of things, I remember actually being with two other etheric souls, right? There was the three of us communicating without all these words. And I really feel that this was my two soul sisters that I was saying goodbye to. I'll see you on the other side, of which at that point, the other side was Earth, right? And so as a child, I had two soul sisters, really deep, 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 deep friends, people I always knew. So I was always somewhat awake in this way. I was always a bit aware that there was so much more than this, that I had come to do some spiritual work. I started to study as a teenager back in, really, it was the late 60s. I was in high school and I started reading all the more spiritual books, esoteric books that I could get my hands on. And so it has been a lifelong study for me. And eventually I really became more psychic. I became an intuitive energy healer. And through that process, I started to be able to hear the Akashic Record Keepers speak to me. And once I could hear them, it took a while. It was even a 5-year process. And so I kind of like to say that because oftentimes people think about spiritual awakening or our spiritual journeys as something that happens overnight. Like, oh, I could hear and then I knew and then I did and then it happened, right? Like it's going to happen in a week or a month or even a year. But a lot of that process for me went on for 5, 10, 20 years. So 30 plus years later, I'm still learning, growing, listening to the record keepers, doing what they ask in the world. So it really was a journey of becoming and realizing that part of my soul's plan, one of my purposes was to help anchor the Akashic Records back on the planet.
Interesting. Well, it's been my experience, Lisa, that all little children, we all come in with the ability to communicate with spirit. We all come in with intuitive abilities. And what you mentioned to your mom, standing there in the kitchen as a toddler, I've heard many, many times from mothers and grandmothers, primarily about their children and their grandchildren. And also it's been my experience that we start to shut down those abilities around the age of 7 or so, 6, 7, 8-ish, because we have adults telling us, oh, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not really real. Or friends saying, oh, man, you're just weird. What's wrong with you? Why are you talking to somebody that's not there? Are you nuts? What's going on? And I understand that. I learned how to do all this, what I call woo-woo stuff, the being a psychic medium and a medical intuitive and all of that. And I also, it doesn't come in instantly. It's interesting to me that you're saying that because I find people that are doing this as a child, sometimes they believe that they just have it and they just run off with it and it works great. But it's been my experience, even if somebody does keep those skills front and center as they're growing, it's practice. The more you do it, the more you get validation for the information you receive, the more validation you get, the more you trust it. And then it's just second nature. So I too have been at this for 30 years, not full time until the last 5 or 6 years, but my skills continued to sharpen too, just from using it. It's like walking. Back to the toddler, a toddler has to practice walking. Toddler doesn't just get up and walk without ever falling down. It's not how it works. And I think this is the same thing.
Absolutely. It's absolutely true. And practice. And the other side of it is that we grow and change, right? As a person, as a personality. Well, we can deepen our faith. We can hone our skills. Sometimes that's by taking classes or just practicing more. And the very interesting part right now in history is there is actually more light coming to the earth. There is higher vibrational energies. We're actually seeing it as solar flares. There's more aurora borealis, those beautiful northern lights, but coming way further down into the country, all over the world, all over the planet. And that really is more light on the earth. And many of us feel it. Sometimes we feel it just as being really exhausted or kind of being out of our bodies or weird. Sometimes it just feels like wobbly to me. But literally, as the vibration raises on the earth, which it is doing, that will raise our vibration and that will expand our gifts. And so we'll all be seeing our gifts opening and expanding and getting stronger, better, more really over this next year. I think is going to be a big shift for everyone on the planet, but really over the next 5 and 10 years, as more light is coming to Earth, we'll start to notice it more globally for humanity.
Why do you think that's happening? Why is more light coming to Earth?
So if we go back and we look at some of the ideas of the Indian idea, the East Indian Vedic astrology, and they talk about yugas that last a yuga lasts 26,000 years, right? So they're cycles, and those cycles are connected to where the planet is in the galaxy. And so galactically, and that kind of big galactic alignment, we are more aligned to the center of our galaxy. And this really allows a higher energy, more light come to Earth. And so what we've seen through history, although it's usually not called that, but we go through different ages, and the Dark Age is a good example of it. So 1,000 years ago, we were at a very energetic low point in the world, a very, little light on the earth. And so that means that there was just, not much wisdom. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of, challenges, the Dark Ages, right? A lot of people got killed, a lot of wars, a lot of fear of the devil, etc. And so, it's taken 1,000 years to come out of that, but literally completing this cycle, we're moving into a new golden age. And again, these are big cycles. These are 600 or 800 year cycles. So we've just stuck our toe in that water, and I really believe we'll start to see it quickening. But we stuck our toe in that water back in around the 70s. So now 50 years later, we're starting to notice it and feel it. So it's kind of that slow. So over the next 50 years, I think we'll see phenomenal changes on the earth and with humanity and consciousness raising.
Interesting. The 60s and 70s too, the hippies, the flower children, all of that, the age of Aquarius. I think that really was a big shift, wasn't it, of this opening up. I actually am thinking, I'm listening to you talk about all this galactic stuff. I'm thinking, well, I need to find an astrophysicist to have on the show to talk about this, because it's fascinating listening to you discuss this. I wasn't aware of it, but I can read, I can learn.
Right. And that's exactly what the dawning of the age of Aquarius was in the 60s. That was the dawning. That was the beginning of this new age, which is, again, astrologically, we've moved into Aquarius. And just, right, again, very, it was dawning. We were sticking our toe in the water back late 60s, early 70s. And so we thought that by 2012, which again, was the end of the Mayan calendar, right? A lot of people thought that might be the end of the world, but To me, that was very much the end of that cycle. And so that was the end of that calendar cycle. And now we moved into this new one. So even if you're looking, the more astrologically, it really did start. I don't know if there's a real hard date anywhere around that, but I'm, going to say that late 60s, early 70s, 2012 was a big pivotal point. Wasn't nearly as strong as I actually believe this shift, there's an ending. So what the record keepers tell me is that this year we are completing many patterns and programs that have held the earth in an old ancient energy, which is not beneficial for where we're going, what we're here to do spiritually, consciously. And so a lot of those patterns and programs have been being worked on, cleared, released with light workers, energetically, really astrologically. It happens naturally, but a lot of us, people who have been part of these through many, 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 many lifetimes, the record keepers tell me that I've had 1,000 lives on Earth. So coming back, that was part of my purpose, was to help anchor. That's what they asked me to do. Anchor the Akash back on the planet, because they had pulled the energy away during the Dark Ages. And so they said, now is the time, again, with the dawning of the age of Aquarius, now is the time to re-anchor the Akash so people can access their soul guidance, their wisdom, their library. And so it's all coming together in just a very perfect way. And so I think we'll see a lot of big shifts next year.
I keep having the Fifth Dimension song, The Age of Aquarius, Aquarius. Yeah, I'm going to hear that in my head playing while you're talking about all of this. How funny is that? Well, that's really exciting. I think so many people think, our planet's in so much trouble and there's never been more strife and more opposites and more fighting and blah, 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 blah. And that is just not even remotely true. If you go back in history, we're really in pretty good shape. And I love to hear things like what you're talking about. Yeah. Are there conflicts? Yes. I think the 24/7 news cycle keeps us ensconced in it for those of us that subscribe to that. And I think it raises fear, because fear gets eyeballs and ears listening, and eyeballs watching and ears listening. And it's all about increasing the number of people that see the stories or hear the stories, because they get bigger ad dollars for it. So I think people here in America say, America's never been more divided. And I say, well, did you ever hear about the Civil War? Seriously.
What?
Yeah. So I don't buy that for a second. When you access the Akashic Records, do you see something? Do you hear something? Do you feel something? What's your technique? What is it that you experience when you're accessing them?
So I activate really a lot of the clairs, which are the clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience, right? Seeing, hearing, clairaudience. So everyone, again, has these abilities, these gifts. Most of us are never taught about them. No one, again, they're things that we often have to kind of activate by putting our attention on them and focus and practice, right? So even meditating takes a while, right? That's about quieting your mind and really more moving into your heart center. These are practices. We all have the abilities and we need to practice them. So what I have been given by the Akashic Record Keepers, so let me just go back one step, which is everyone has their own Akashic library, right? The Akashic Records is actually like a big library, and each person has their own, along with a set of librarians. And so the librarians, I often refer to as the Akashic Record Keepers or the Record Keepers. We have a whole team of them. So again, it's amazing that each and every person, has all these different types of guides. We have a team of angels. We have some guides that are much more connected to our earthly life. And we have our Akashic Record Keepers that keep this infinite wisdom of your soul's journey throughout time in the Akashic Records. And so when the record keepers start to talk to me, right, before I figured out who was talking to me, they asked me to start a school. And when I said, well, how do I do that? They said, we'll help you. We'll give you energetic keys to access the Akashic Records with ease. And those keys came in the form of sacred prayers. So when I teach my 5-step wisdom prayer system, what that does is it gives my students the key, it's a sacred prayer, to energetically open the doors, move into that space and field of the Akashic Records, and helps them to start to align and attune to their record keepers so they can literally have a conversation with these beautiful beings of light that are here in support to each person. So the information does come through, again, because we're unique and we all kind of have home different clairs. I always say I'm clairvoyant, but my joke is that my clairvoyance is out of focus, right? It's like my clairvoyance needs glasses. So I see kind of...
And clairvoyance is being able to see things energetically.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I'll see a fuzzy picture, kind of an out of focus, like snapshot, like a Polaroid, if you remember the good old Polaroid cameras. But it's enough information. So I get a picture, I receive claircognizantly, which is clear knowingness. That's what claircognizance translates to, clear knowingness, often coming through our heart or just kind of feeling that I just know the story. I know the information. So image, kind of that knowingness dropping in. I often will also hear clairaudiently, which means I'll literally kind of hear a sentence or a message. And as I start to speak it, often it goes from a sentence into a paragraph or sometimes a story. That's the record keepers kind of talking to me and through me. So that's clairaudience and a little bit of channeling thrown in there. And then the clairsentience, that's the feeling. That's the, it feels like this. It feels peaceful, or it feels light, or there's messages in that feelingness. And sometimes that clairsentience also shows up in the way, like people feel goosebumps, or they're like, oh, I got chills, or I feel that in my head, or right, all those kind of pieces. And so we all receive information in usually a variety of ways.
Yeah. I find too with my students and with myself that a lot of it is predicated on how we learn. If we're a visual learner, maybe that's going to be the primary way that we access it initially, and then the other senses come in. Or if we're an auditory learner, or if we're a kinesthetic learner. And so how I teach is that let's see what works best for you. I don't think there's one right way and one wrong way. It reminds me of back in the day when a left-handed child would get in trouble if they didn't write with their right hand. Well, who cares how they write? Why does it matter? It's kind of my feeling about it. When I access, and I didn't realize, and I think this is the Akashic Records, I don't know, but when I access past lives, I've never heard anybody else do it this way, and it just came into me this way, Lisa, so I'm eager to hear what you think of it. I envision myself standing in this endless hallway, very narrow walls, very tall ceiling. On the walls are big square mirrors lined up vertically and horizontally. And let's say I'm working with a client. I'm working with Stanley. And Stanley wants to know if he was an engineer in a past life. So we'll ask a question. The mirrors that correlate with the question we ask will come out from the wall as if they're on a hydraulic arm. And then I'll say, show me the one that correlates the most. And that one will come out the farthest. And then I envision myself going in front of that mirror. And it's like I'm walking into the mirror, like Alice walking in, to wherever she walked into through the looking glass and Wonderland. And then I'm given year, name, background, what's going on, all this stuff. And in most instances, we can corroborate the information with historic documents that we can access online. So it's really fun when that happens. So am I accessing the Akashic Records or just some past life thing of my client? What's going on there?
Wow. Yes. No, that's very exciting and fascinating. I've never heard anyone describe it quite like that.
I haven't either.
I've taught thousands of people around the world. So that's really very cool. So I'm hearing, yes, you are actually accessing the Akashic Records. You are moving into that field. And so it is here and available to us. Really the thing that is kind of important to realize is it's a vibrational match. So when your vibration and your client's vibration are high enough and can match that energy to move into the Akasha, then you do. And that's actually how I first started kind of stumbling into the Akashic Records. I was doing psychic, intuitive, clairvoyant readings and healings. And every once in a while, I get this. Mine was more of a timeline. You got a kind of a haul. I would see it like all of this information kind of lined up like in a timeline. And it would be like laid out in front of me. Like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took literally almost 5 years before I said, what is this?
Yeah.
Who is this?
Well, I never realized it was the Akashic Records until the last few years, but I get amazing details. I mean, I can tell you what you were wearing. I can tell you what your house looked like. I can tell you, other stuff. I'm a visual learner. I'm getting information downloaded into my head like you. I call those divine downloads. I'm hearing things. I'm feeling things. I'm smelling things. It's like everything's all involved. And this hallway too, which is really interesting, Lisa, is endless. And the mirrors look like some of them are smaller than a dot, and then it goes on forever. But the thing that cracks me up the most is those mirrors are lined up perfectly in vertical and horizontal columns. So I get that there's an order to it. And I think, okay, is it just whoever the keepers are were potty trained too early? What's going on with that? It's just like, are they just, which is interesting. On that.
Right. I'll sometimes laugh and feel like, they really have the Dewey Decimal System down, right?
Yeah.
However that is. But the other way that I see it very often, and this started to happen many years ago when I would do something similar, like someone would say, I'd like to take a healing class. I don't know if I have any gifts. Do I have past lives? What can I know? And I would often feel like I was moving into just a void, like this just black space. And then from that black space and that question, I would see like a big spinning ball all around me, like I'm the center hub of a huge, right? Like I'm in the middle of the earth and it's spinning around me. And of course, my earth likes to be gold. But anyway, but they're just like streaks and lines. And I would say, okay, show me the lifetimes in which this person had been a healer or had gifts and talents that we can reclaim for them. And kind of similar, then those would like pop out of the bowl and they would kind of hold still. Like, so the ball is still spinning around, but those lifetimes have now shown up and they almost, for me, fall in kind of linearly, right? And so what I find is often the first life they give me, although So it really isn't totally linear, because often the first life they want to talk about is the one that's most similar or connected to this present lifetime.
I get the exact same thing. Yeah.
Right.
What's the
So
correlation?
it might be a work or a karmic pattern or soul contract. So it might be 800 years ago, and that is very similar in a sense. And we're completing some patterns, reclaiming those gifts, clearing, releasing the trauma that may have kept that person from accessing, say, those healing gifts. And then we can do a lot of healing work around that. And then the record keepers say, oh, now you can come forward to the other 2 lifetimes where they were healers, or maybe they did kind of medicinal herbs or tinctures. Maybe they were a shaman. So these 4 different lifetimes will kind of line up in almost in a sense, order of importance, I guess would be the way to say it. And then we can heal anything that needs to be released, any old contracts, any vows. Sometimes we make a vow that says, I'm never going to do that again. That got me killed, right? So those lives where we were killed as a witch or burned at the stake or run out of town or locked away, whatever it was. And so we can energetically, in this space of the quantum field of the Akashic Records of Source, it's all really part and parcel of the same thing. We can clear, release, delete vows, update contracts, release contracts that no longer serve you, that are from a past life, because since you're not in that life, they're not serving you anymore. And do healing on all of that, and then energetically kind of reclaim all of those gifts and talents, like bringing them present into the person, into their energy field, body now. And then those past lives, which have now been healed. So it's kind of fascinating again, because we're in the quantum field. They go back as changed lives into that quantum field. So it's a pretty interesting thing, because I believe that life for that person has shifted. Now, I couldn't ever prove it because, I can't physically at the moment. Who knows? Maybe next year I'll be able to travel outside of time and space in my body and go check it out. But that's what it feels like, because literally the person in the present time has changed. They've released the fear. They've released those vows. They've released whatever, those old contracts, the blocks that have been holding them back.
I see when I'm working with people, I love, and I'm sure you get this, I love when people who either call into my show or they are a client, they'll say, okay, tell me about my past lives. And I'll say, honey, I'm not going to live long enough to talk to you about all your past lives. So that's why we cut to the chase. Do you have a question that you want to know about? We'll hone in on that one little snippet of your past lives. But I find, and I'm interested to hear your take on this, Lisa, that there will be a semblance of a script that will repeat throughout multiple lifetimes. And we're looking at that same little bit of the script from a different perspective, different time, different what's happening in the world. Where are you? What language are you speaking? What's the circumstance? But it's an underlying script that's the same. And it's been my experience and my thought that we're looking at that script from a bunch of different perspectives. Maybe you're the person who dies as a child. Maybe in the next lifetime, you're the mother of, the father of, the sister of, the colleague of, the doctor of, the whatever. We're looking at a piece of that script from a bunch of different perspectives. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. My thought is that the way I understand it through the Akashic Records is that there are many, many things that we want to learn about, right? Just being human, emotions, relationships, just functioning in the world, honestly, is a lot of growth. And so we often call it karma. But to me, what we're looking at is patterns that are challenges to us, and they're usually challenges to all humans. And we want to learn and grow. So our biggest mission, well, we have a couple big missions when we come into a body. one of the biggest ones is about soul growth, and that means learning. So we write a plan, right? So my book that came out in January is called Your Soul Has a Plan, right? Understanding your life purpose through the Akashic Records, because we make a huge plan every single lifetime. And we say, I never worked out that jealousy pattern or that addictive pattern or that kind of creative pattern, right? Which could be anything. So I want to work on abundance or creativity. And that may mean that you are in one life born, let's go with abundance. One life you're born into a very, very poor family where you struggle all of your lifetime with poverty, and your soul's desire, part of the plan, is to actually learn how to break free from that. Now, when we look at that bigger truth, the truth is that we are infinite, abundant souls, and all the abundance of the universe is here for us. If we can know, understand, tap into, align to, open to. And so we may struggle with abundance of, say, money, because of course there is abundance of love and abundance of health and, all those other aspects. But if we're looking at money, we may struggle for many, many different lifetimes around money. And maybe one lifetime it is as a child who is very poor and continues on following that same pattern. In another lifetime, you may have a lot of money, but be very poor relationship-wise, health-wise. Maybe you're wealthy, but you die all alone, and you even vow, I never want to have money again. Money was bad. That ruined my life, right? And so we're making vows. We're getting stuck in beliefs and the more human energies of emotions. Another lifetime it might be around, every time I get a little bit of money in the bank, something goes wrong, right? My cat has to go to the vet, my car breaks, et cetera, right? You've heard all of these stories. I'm sure you've seen so many of these different lifetimes, but they're all the lessons that we as infinite souls who are here to learn and grow and have some fun, we think this is fun, to experience. And after many, many, many lives in all these different ways and every different, kind of pattern, it might be 20 or 100 different lifetimes of struggle with money. We finally we get it. We realize, we have a change in consciousness. We shift our energy to realize a greater truth. And that makes life flow, right? So we get into that beautiful energy of the flow of abundance and knowing that in a bigger way. And so we create from that space of abundance. And we do the work that we love and that we're called to do. But it's so much more than just a mindset, right? I can say, if you just shift to that, right? But it's so deep. And again, in our lives, we have ancestral patterns. We're born into families where there is ancestral lack and poverty. So it comes from our parents and our childhood and our ancestors. And it comes from the beliefs that we're growing up in, right? So levels and layers to work on. And the Akashic Records is one of the things I often work with my students in the more advanced classes around abundance, because there's so many layers to kind of understand. We go in the records and look at those past lives where we vowed never to have money, where we took vows of poverty, right? As monks or nuns or priests or ascetics in some, religion or other, we say, I vow never to take money for my God-given gifts. And so we have these vows. Anyway, so lots and lots of layers, lots of information to support us when we start diving into the Akashic Records.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned joy and fun, because I've heard many, many times, and I don't understand this from a human perspective, so I'm eager to hear your thoughts on this. I've heard from spirit a bazillion times. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad in the spirit world. It's just an experience. So they look at us going through something that we would deem to be horrific from a human perspective. And they're saying, wonder what she's going to do with that. What's she going to create out of that? How's this serving her? How's this benefiting her? And on and on. And then we humans look at that and we think, that's just twisted. How could that be? So I don't understand it from a human perspective. Where I go is it feasible? I've heard it so many times that I am satisfied with, well, it's feasible. I'll find out when I get to heaven. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that is the truth, right? And I often will say kind of truth with a capital T, because there are many unified truths. There are truths that have been held through many different religions and beliefs and philosophies, and that there is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. We are not victims. We are not villains. I mean, we may show up that way in different lifetimes, but we created ourselves. And so the reason that it's important to start to realize that we wrote that plan, right? We made those choices. No one is making us do these things. We chose to be born into a family where we have lack and we want to learn about abundance. And some people have humongous breakthroughs around, say, money. And then they go on and teach that to so many people in the world. Or, of course, I think around addiction, Alcoholics Anonymous is a phenomenal kind of space example of a man who found God and was able to end his addiction through that, knowing that there is a higher source. So this is part of why we come, because we want to learn these kind of big sacred truths, and we really want to share and teach that to other people in the world. And so as we start to raise our consciousness, become, more aware and awake, then we start to realize, when I can stay in my heart and kind of stay out of my head and my fear and those emotions that, chatter at us and we worry about, when we can stay in a space of love and caring, compassion, and peace, what we realize is that we are magnetic beings. We are calling back to us what we are putting out in the universe. And so when we are putting out love and peace, we are calling love and peace back. So we can start to realize that these are creative energies. We are magnetic beings that have written a very complicated plan to learn and grow and to share the learning, to share the gifts, to share the truth with others. And when we do cross over, then we go, wow, that was crazy. I can't believe I fell for the story, right? I can't believe I thought that was real, right? People go into such fear over so many different things. And not that it's not justified. There's a lot of horrific challenges in the world, in our lives. And so it's about somehow holding that space, creating the balance, right? Being that love and compassion and caring and forgiveness, because each and every one of us are pure divine souls. We are pure beings of light, and we have come to learn, to grow, to share, to teach. And we do it again and again, hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes here on this planet, as well as probably thousands or millions in other worlds and planes and dimensions. And that is kind of, if you look at it as a game, that's the game the soul plays, is, learning, growing, figuring it out, doing it again.
Well, and I think we need that contrast in order to create, and we're here to create. That's how we grow. If everything was just hunky all the time, well, right, we wouldn't have any incentive to create. And yet, I agree with you in having compassion for those that have suffered horrifically in some instances. That would be a hard sell. Okay, you dreamt up that plan when you were in heaven before you were conceived and incarnated. And people say, why in the name of God would I ever do that? That's just why. I would never choose to do that. A parent who loses a child, why would they ever choose that? And yet there's a bigger story there. Perhaps I go back to maybe they were the child that died. Maybe they were in a different position, the doctor of, the colleague of, the whatever of, and they wanted to experience it as the parent of in this lifetime. I've got a generic question for you on the Akashic Records. I am a gal with a communications degree who's invented surgical devices that are sold throughout the world, some of which have been on the market for 30 years. I wasn't a medical provider. I'm not an engineer. People go, well, how'd that work? I don't know. I knew what was out there. I knew what the problems were. I came up with these ideas. I hired engineers. I have patents and trademarks and stuff. Is that in the Akashic Records too? Was I accessing somebody else, I don't know, going through ways to invent this? Certainly, I didn't have a background to do it, but the information came into me. Is all of that in the Akashic Records? Are the Akashic Records just people's life experiences? Does it all go into kind of like a collective consciousness that we can all access? How I perceive it is our heads are big satellite dishes. We receive and transmit frequencies. Every thought's on a frequency. So I was on that frequency line of information coming in. That's just one example of what I've lived. Many other examples that I've lived. But is that part of the Akashic Records? Is that something else? What is that?
No, it is part of the Akashic Records. So I have had so many clients who in their records and I will get that they have come to invent something. Now, sometimes, and it depends because nothing is written in stone. So you don't actually have to do anything that you planned. You can ignore it all.
That's a big point. That's a big point. That was one of my next questions. Yeah. You come up with this. Yeah, you come up with this plan, but you don't. I want to find out what happens if you don't follow it.
So with you as an inventor, what I would say is there's a combination of galactic energy, and when I say that, we are not alone in the galaxy. We are not alone in the multiverse, and so we have lived many, many millions, billions. No time, space. Other lives in other planets, planes, and dimensions. And what the record keepers are telling me is that there are so many souls, so many blessed souls. We are so grateful that they are coming to create new inventions to help us to, again, heal a lot of what we've done to our planet, right? Fix the water, fix the air, fix and help to be able to create the kind of more beautiful garden planet that this started out to be. So there are souls who write into their plan like, hey, I want to come and bring that invention. I want to help humanity. I want to create this item, whatever it might be. It might be ecological or medical or, I know there are souls out there that have soul plans, soul contracts to come up with some new inventions, say to heal cancer more easily, quickly, efficiently, without so much illness and destruction in the process, right? But the right person has to kind of remember it and listen. So that's a big piece, right? You got the information, and instead of saying, who am I to do that, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical anything or whatever. Instead of ignoring it and walking away and going on, with communication, which you could have easily done, you said, ooh, I get this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get experts to help me and do it. So it's absolutely part of your soul's plan and the contracts that you wrote to bring forward new inventions to help humanity. And so that is written in there. And we are ancient souls from many different worlds. And the other thing that what they were saying that was interesting about you specifically is that you brought part of what was helpful is you brought that back from the future. So your future self helped you to believe that this was possible and what you were really to do. So kind of this future information helped you to go, oh, I can do this. You know, whether you ever thought, I know I've done it or anything like that. Your future self was like, this is possible. We got this. We can do this. This is how.
Well, it's interesting. I'm remembering when I was probably 24 or something. I had just moved to LA, and a gal who was a friend of mine got me a reading with some psychic to the stars. Kenny Kingston, I think his name was. And he said, I'm sure he's long deceased because he was elderly when I met him. But he said, everything you do in this lifetime is going to involve healing in some way, because you've been a healer in many, many, many lifetimes. You've been doctors, you've been healers, you've been all this other stuff. And everything you do is going to involve healing in some way. So what did I do right out of college? I was in the medical supply industry. I've manufactured stuff. I've invented stuff. Now I'm doing energy healing. It's interesting that the healing thing is part of the equation in different modalities, if you will, in different segments. You know, actual selling stuff to help people heal, inventing stuff to help people heal, manufacturing stuff to help people heal. Now doing the energy healing, and also not just physical healing, but also talking with deceased loved ones helps a person heal their grief. Working with past lives helps a person heal whatever it is they're dealing with from an emotional standpoint, you know, all of that. So it really is fascinating. Thank you for answering that so succinctly. That's been something I've always wondered. Is this all part of the Akashic Records? And are the Akashic Records what we also refer to as the collective consciousness, where we all have access to all information, certainly when we're in pure spirit form, but also when we're in human, when our spirit's connected to a body? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that we're really very complicated, so it's not as simple as one thing or the other. So what the record keepers say is that if you imagine, again, you have a whole huge library filled with, let's just go millions of books. That is your Akashic record, past, present, future, right? It's written. It's not written in stone because it is malleable, but it is written, and this is about you and your soul. Now, there are records of the planet. I believe there are huge records that I call like science that hold a lot of this information and probably hold some of this kind of information that would be like about some of these scientific inventions, say, that we can tap into. But the way I'm hearing, because the record keepers are always kind of chatting away at me, what I'm hearing is that, say for you, Julie, when you wrote that contract to create a medical device, say to help humanity, right? Your big contract was to help humanity, you know, in this healing way. For you, it wasn't one area because you are so ancient. You have had so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes that you had so many modalities you could tap into and remember from all of these books in your library. So that's why you've been able to do it, you know, with medical devices and talking to loved ones and, you know, all of your other gifts and all of these different talents, because people like you and me have come back at this time to bring those gifts back and share them with the world. Not just one. A lot of people who are old souls, but maybe a little younger, they may come back and maybe they become an acupuncturist because that's the big gift and talent they wanted to share with humanity right now. or they might be a hands-on healer or psychic or. So they may pick one modality in the to express in this one lifetime. But some of us, there's just so much stuff we want to share, right? So
when you talked about all those books, I got goosebumps, which is validation from spirit in my book, that I founded 9 companies in 5 industries. I mean, people think, well, are you just schizophrenic or what? I'm like, no, I just was interested in stuff and took money from one company and founded another one and played with that and then did something else and something else. So that makes total sense to me with these books. Circling back around to, we have a plan, but we don't necessarily have to follow it. Is that where free will comes in? Talk about that and tell us about what happens if we don't follow it. Do we just live a life of strife? What happens?
Well, it's very interesting because, yes, we write this whole huge plan. We come into a body, we have complete amnesia, or at least most of us have complete amnesia. And then we don't remember the plan. And so we go, stumbling forward. So those who listen to spirit, who listen to their higher selves, who follow their intuition, follow their heart, obviously it makes it a little bit easier. If you have a life where you are loved and life is not really, physically traumatic and challenging, it's a little bit easier to spend more time in that consciousness. But we have free will. So even when the record keepers said to me, we would like you to help us anchor the Akash back on the earth because we had pulled it away 1,000 years ago. Will you help us? I said to them, I have 3 babies. What are you, crazy? I literally had 3 toddlers. My son was 1.5 when my twins were born.
Oh, my.
And I was a little on the overwhelmed side, let me just say.
I bet.
But I felt it. I knew it was truth. They said, you were one of us. You came to help re-anchor the Akashic Records with us. We will help you and support you. And I said, I had a moment of choice. I could have said, no, I'm just going to be the mom in the suburbs that I am. But I said, no, I'm with you. I feel that. You got to help me all the way down the road and I'm in. And so it was a choice of free will. If I had said no, they probably would have never talked to me again. Or who knows? But
And that takes courage to say yes. It takes a lot of courage to go, oh, well, I don't know how to do this. How am I going to do this? And
exactly.
You're led every step of the way. And I'm sure there were times when you were thinking, what the heck did I get myself into here?
Right, absolutely. And also along that way, I knew they were there when they said start a school. We want you to start a school because you're very galactic. You are a healer. You have all these gifts that we want you to share through the Akashic Records and anchor this on earth and teach this to other people. And I said, how? And they said, we'll give you this 5-step wisdom prayer system. No, they didn't quite say it in those words. We'll give you, vibrational keys. We'll give you these sacred prayers. And they did. And I said, okay, let me give these prayers to some of my friends who I knew could access the records. And I said, try this, see if it works. And every one of them, there was about a half a dozen or so, all of them came back and they said, wow, that was amazing. It was easy and light and deep all at the same time. Yes, these work. This is great. And I said, good. Okay, now I can go ahead and write these down and start a school and do all of this. But of course, it's a process, just as you know.
Yeah.
I mean, all those companies, it's a lot of work, but it's filled with our own passion and our joy that really is driving us to share this wisdom and this light and these gifts. And so in a way, I think for many of us, it's harder to say no than to say yes, right? To shut that door, to take that that step. I would probably have spent my life saying, what did I do? What happened? But when I published my first book back in 2015, I won an agent in a book contest. I won an agent who got me a book deal, right, with a publisher. And so that's when I realized, because the record keepers had said, it's time to write a book. And I'm like, I don't know how to write a book,
Yeah.
And so I worked in the records, and I ended up, they told me exactly, do this and do this. And I followed what they said, and it all worked out perfectly. And I did this book program that had a contest, and I won the first prize with an agent and a publisher. And so they have been, supporting me very, consciously all of these years. And so it's been a great, great blessing. So when we say yes, we are often really held and guided and supported by all of these beautiful beings of light, our Akashic record keepers, our angels, our different guides, our loved ones who have crossed over. They're all different. They're all in different realms. So, but they're all there supporting us.
Yeah. Circling back to what happens when somebody doesn't follow their path.
Oh, guys. Yeah, I think it becomes often a struggle. I think that they keep bumping up against the challenges, because we all write the challenges in, because it's through challenge, right? Through adversity that we often are growing, that we're starting to think out of the box. We're creating something new. We're thinking differently. So we're creating that way. We're overcoming the challenges. We're learning to forgive, all of those pieces. And when we start to say no, when we get stubborn or we get stuck in our ego or our personality, we're bumping up against that also. We're bumping up against the ego that wants to hold us down. And so those challenges keep repeating again and again, because we're not learning. We're not growing as a soul. We're really kind of blocking all of what we've come to do. We're blocking our plan to, from flowing through us. And so in many ways, we get stuck in that one space. And so we may live a very challenging life. And then once we're there kind of reviewing that life and that plan, it's like, now I'm going to go back and do it again, because I didn't learn any of those lessons. I didn't share any of those gifts. I didn't do what I came to do. So now I'll go back again.
Yeah, sure. Interesting. Couple last questions as we're wrapping up. I could talk to you all day, girl, but why do you think we incarnate? You touched on it a little bit before. Please say more. Why do you think we incarnate?
Well, the way I understand it, and in, again, kind of having enough galactic memory of other lifetimes in angelic realms, or sometimes in other places or dimensions that are just all very lovely, right? That, as funny as it sounds, it's like it gets boring just lolling around in the universe. Is kind of how I get it. So as a soul, we did come to experience, right? We can look at it that way, that we individuated from Source because Source wanted to experience everything. The good, the bad, the ugly, the all of everything. And so we chose this planet, we realized was this, honestly, the way I hear it in the records is that we actually created the planet the way we have been experiencing it, to have the challenges and the traumas, the programs, the patterns, all of this different challenge, so that we could create this learning space to come to learn and grow. And so they often talk about it as, right, if you look at, again, kind of Vedic astrology or some of the East Indian beliefs and Buddhism or Hinduism, that we've been stuck in this karmic pattern or this wheel of life, of karma, that we've been really stuck in it. And that's part of why we come back again and again and again, as we spoke about earlier, to learn and to grow, to break through that pattern, that to have that learning, and then that ability to share it and help other people with what we've learned. So that old karmic wheel of life, the great news is it has been cleared from the Akashic Records. It has been cleared from the higher dimensions. And so now the humans on Earth are really working on finishing up their learning. They are working through becoming more conscious and making greater realizations and doing more forgiveness work and being more compassionate and starting to realize that it's time to heal our planet so that we can continue on this journey on this planet. But I really believe that over the next 50, 100 years, this planet will be a very different place. It will be a playground instead of a working place, that it will become more of a Garden of Eden where we will come and visit or vacation here because we as souls have worked through a lot of this duality and are moving into a higher consciousness, which is really we call more like a tri-wave. It's more of a triangle than right or wrong, good or bad, binary duality. I'm sorry, the duality of that dichotomy, good or bad, right or wrong. And so moving into a different space and energy, the tri-wave, it will be a different world. It will be a different place. And that's what we're creating now. So the good news is for even those stubborn people who have not finished their karmic lessons, I really believe that they will do more learning and growing in some of the other realms, in between realms and other spaces and places, and that this earth will become really a beautiful garden of peace and joy.
What an amazing prediction and vision that is, that you've just shared with us. Thank you so much for that. How can people learn more about you and your work, Lisa?
So you can find me at akashicknowing.com. And everything I do, my 4 books are there. I do Akashic readings and healing sessions for clients. I teach online workshops all of the time. And so really just finding me at Akashic Knowing is really the easiest way to learn all about all of the things that I offer, all the work, and I can teach you how to read your own Akashic records and transform your own life.
Fabulous. What a fun, interesting, informative, and it's just been a fabulous conversation. What a delight to get to meet you and share all this information with you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. All righty, everybody, that's it for this week. Wow, that's going to be a lot for you to digest. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from California, too, where Lisa is. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow Julie on Instagram and YouTube at Ask Julie Ryan, and like her on Facebook at Ask Julie Ryan. To schedule an appointment or submit a question, please visit AskJulieRyan.com.
This show is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. Please contact a licensed professional. The Ask Julie Ryan Show, Julie Ryan and all parties involved in producing, recording, and distributing it assume no responsibility for listeners' actions based on any information heard on this or any Ask Julie Ryan shows or podcasts.